Hi everyone. I'm going to tell you today about one of my new favorite words, Granfalloon. This is from the novel Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, and it refers to a proud but ultimately meaningless association of human beings. So, for example, if you feel a sense of pride in and camaraderie with other people from your home state, even if you've never met them before and have nothing in common with them, that's a Granfalloon. So in the original context from Cat's Cradle, these two characters meet and realize that they're both from Indiana. I'll read you the passage. "My God," she said, "are you a Hoosier?" I admitted I was. "I'm a Hoosier too," she crowed. So then this woman proceeds to rattle off examples of other Hoosiers who are doing noteworthy things, and she says, "I don't know what it is about Hoosiers, but they've sure got something. If somebody was to make a list, they'd be amazed. We Hoosiers got to stick together." So the first thing that I thought of when I was introduced to the concept of a Granfalloon is that it's a pretty apt characterization of how I feel about being Jewish. I'm not religious, and I wasn't raised religiously at all, but I did used to feel a certain sense of pride in being part of the Jewish tribe, just genetically, and I would feel camaraderie with other people when I found out that they were also Jewish. And then after thinking about it, I realized there's just no reason for me to identify with a total stranger with whom I may have nothing in common, just because we probably share a few distant ancestors. And likewise, while there are a disproportionate number of Jews who have risen to high ranks in science and art and entertainment and so on, and that's a fact I used to feel proud of, I no longer think that it makes sense for me to take any personal pride in that fact. This is also, incidentally, how I feel about nationality. I think America's a great country in a lot of ways, and I'm really happy I live here, but I don't feel proud of being an American, the way I think that most people use that phrase. I didn't do anything to be an American. I was born here. I don't think I deserve any credit for that fact. And similarly, I don't feel that other Americans are more deserving of my help or my concern than people from another country. And just like Jewish people, there are plenty of Americans who have done fantastic things and achieved wonderful things, but I don't think that it makes sense for me to feel proud of that fact in a way that I wouldn't feel proud of foreigners doing wonderful things. To add a little nuance to my discussion of Granfalloons, there is a sense in which I think it makes it's reasonable to feel a camaraderie with other people in your group, even people who you don't know, and that's if you have shared experiences based on your group identity. So as a New Yorker, I feel a certain sense of camaraderie with other New Yorkers, because when I meet someone else from New York, even if I don't know them, I know that they've had similar experiences as I've had, and that makes me feel close to them. So I know they've had the same surreal encounters with crazy people, and that they've had the same frustration at the abrupt and incomprehensible changes to the subway schedules. So I'm going to feel a little closer to them than I would to a non-New Yorker, all else equal. But I think the problems come in when you start to identify with your group in a way that actually distorts your thinking about other issues. So for example, if I were to say that, without evidence, that New Yorkers are more moral, or more upstanding, or more deserving of federal aid than people from other states, that would be the Granfalloon effect. If I were similarly to say that it's wrong for states to base themselves around religion, but Israel is an exception because I'm Jewish, that would also be the Granfalloon effect. And the interesting thing about Granfalloons is that research has shown that people tend to exaggerate the similarities within a group and exaggerate the differences between groups. So this is going to heighten your sense that your group is particularly distinct and special. And this is particularly true of nationality. People love stories of national identity, and they love talking about how certain temperaments or personality traits are characteristic of this nation or that nation, but the evidence just doesn't bear it out. Empirically, sex, profession, and social class are much better predictors of someone's personality or behavior than their nationality. The other interesting thing about Granfalloons is that researchers have shown that when you divide people up into groups, even based on some completely random or very trivial or arbitrary characteristic, they start to identify with their group, they start to focus on traits that they think are special about or particular to their group, and they often feel like their group is better than other groups. So in one experiment, researchers took a group of boys and showed them a series of paintings, either by Paul Klee or Vasily Kandinsky. Each boy saw an assortment of paintings. And they asked the boys to rate what they thought of the paintings, and then they divided the boys up into two groups, ostensibly based on whether they preferred the paintings by Klee or preferred the paintings by Kandinsky. The groups were actually random, but the boys didn't know that. And then they asked each boy to assign points, basically rewards, to two other boys, one of whom was from his own group and one of whom was from the other group. And the boys in the clay group tended to dramatically favor the other boys from the clay group, and the boys in the Kandinsky group tended to favor the other boys from the Kandinsky group. And this result is actually replicated with even more trivial group characteristics. So in a similar experiment, researchers asked boys to estimate the number of points, the number of dots on a screen. And then they divided the boys up into two groups based on whether they had overestimated the number of dots or underestimated the number of dots. And sure enough, the overestimators awarded more rewards to their fellow overestimators, and underestimators awarded more rewards to their fellow underestimators. So this leads me to the last danger with Granfalloons, which is that if you start to identify too strongly with your particular group, then you start to feel pressure to hew to the particular viewpoints of that group without thinking critically about them. So this is why I try not to label myself as a Democrat or as a liberal, even if in practice I share a lot of positions with other Democrats or liberals, just because why bias myself with a label if I don't have to? I think also that there's a potential danger in identifying yourself as a skeptic. I don't think it's as dangerous as identifying yourself politically or ideologically, but I think it's something to watch out for, especially if you find yourself starting sentences with the phrase, well, as a skeptic, I believe such and such. Just because if you identify yourself as a skeptic and you get too used to that identity, that group label, then you might feel pressure to adopt the positions of other skeptics without thinking critically about them.